Good morning. This is the Blainsville webcast that be found each week on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and get more information, listen to previous shows at our website, which is behind me, blainsworld.net. I'm your host, Blaine Greenfield, and here in my Zoom studio in lovely downtown Fairview, North Carolina. Each week we focus on positive news and information about people and organizations in both Western North Carolina and throughout the country. And toward that end, it's my pleasure to introduce my guest for this show. And she is Emily Dake, an actor, costumier, voice coach, public health researcher. You name it, Emily has done it, it seems like. Emily, what you can do, you can wave to all your fans and friends who are watching this.
Hi,
Okay.
everybody. Excited to be
That,
here. Thanks for having me.
well, glad to have you. And it's a real pleasure to see you, Emily, or speak to you kind of on a one-on-one basis here. And I've had the pleasure of seeing you in a bunch of things over the past year or so. And you are just, I'd say, and I mean it, a real talent. It's just,
Thank
it's so
you.
much, it's so much watching on stage, but what I'm finding out about you, there's a lot more to you than just your on-stage performance. Emily Dake is an Appalachian-born and bred artist and public health professional based here in Nashville. She is classically trained soprano vocalist and vocal coach, as well as being an MPH, holding an MPH from the Gilding School of Global Public Health at UNC Chapel Hill. After a 15-year career in nonprofit development and operations, Emily now works as an independent consultant to local health and social service organizations conducting community-based research. She also performs as well as does costumes for productions in the area, including Act Heart, Munford Players, Hendersonville Theater, Hendersonville Haunted Farm, and Halloween Incorporated. And so the question I asked Emily, I just introduced you as Appalachian born. So as a kid, you were from this area.
Mhm.
Did you always know you wanted to be, I guess, 47 different things when you grew up?
Yeah, because it changed every day.
Yeah,
So
I
like
like
I
it.
mean there was a time I wanted to be an astronaut. There was a time that I wanted to be a doctor. There was a time I wanted to be an Olympic runner, even though I don't run. Like I'm not I was like I just wanted I think I've always just really loved like learning new things, and so every day it was something different because I was like I would love to spend my life learning this, and then it's like oh wait no I would love to spend my life learning this. Oh no wait I think I would actually love to spend my life learning this. So I've kind of curated a life now where I do a million different things in a day, and it kind of scratches my ADHD brain in a really great way. So
Well, talk about then public health. So, as a child, you grew up in this area and went to school in Western North Carolina.
I did. Yeah. I went to undergrad at Vassar College in New York.
Okay.
And then I lived in New York for a little bit and then I came back. And I've been in Asheville area for about 10 years, originally from Eastern Tennessee. And then I went to grad school in 2018 for public health. And my specific focus was health behaviors. So that's essentially analyzing how people make health decisions and then figuring out ways to help people make, more informed health decisions. So a lot of health communication, a lot of health, like social science research, and a lot of like focus on what we call the social determinants of health. So like poverty and housing and food insecurity and what those do to impact people's overall health, and how we can kind of fix the root causes of some of those issues.
Now, when you were a kid, though, did you know you wanted to move into that initially, or even when you went to college? That, when
Yeah.
you were a kid, did you have some other ambition you wanted to be?
I mean, the main kind of through line of my life has been acting and music mainly. Like I started singing before I started talking. And I've been singing my entire life. Even when I took a, big hiatus from acting after college just because I didn't have time and I was working on this other career, but I still sang in like community choirs and things like that. So I think singing and acting has been the biggest through line of like what I wanted to be when I grow up. And so, yeah.
So, when you were a kid, so did you
Mhm.
perform in plays and stuff, or
Yeah.
church things?
Yeah.
I want
I
to put
did
you
a lot
on.
of church things, and my first real musical was Annie. I was 10 years old. I got to play one of the orphans. It was the most amazing experience. It sold out like every single night, so we extended it twice. So I think we ended up performing. It was supposed to be a month run, and I think we ran for 2.5 months.
Where was that at?
That was in Chattanooga, so the Chattanooga Little Theater, now the Chattanooga Theater Center.
But it's interesting you say that because I'll share an idea that I've shared with almost every local theater, and nobody's taken me up on it, Emily. But if you have some say, maybe you can get somebody to do it. But I want some local theater to do a fundraiser, and everybody would do their very first role. You know,
I think that's so fun.
just I even tell it to you. I mean, I'd love to see you as
Yeah.
Annie. Um, so you were one of the little kids.
I was one of the orphans. Yeah.
Do you still remember the part?
Tessa, I was the one that's always going, "Oh my goodness, oh my
I
goodness."
remember.
Yeah.
Now, but wouldn't that be cool? So now that role, did they have a videotape of that, or anybody make a record of it?
Yeah, we do have video of it because it pops up on Facebook every once in a while. I'm still friends with several of the girls I was in that cast with. And so every once in a while one of them or one of the moms will post, "Oh, I found this picture, or I found this video." So, yeah.
But I just think it would be such a great fundraiser. I'm sure every local theater, and I'd say I'd even help run it. But and you could be the vocal coach, or you could be the
Yeah.
music director of it. But wouldn't that be fun? That everybody creates their very first role. I think it'd go great. So it reminds me there was uh, what was the TV show? Big Bang Theory, and then the little kid in it had his own show.
Yeah. Sheldon, the
Sheldon,
young Sheldon,
young
yeah.
Sheldon. So Jason Alexander, you got a kick out of this, played his teacher one time. And so they convinced young Sheldon to be in Annie. But young Sheldon got he backed out. So Jason Alexander had to step in for him at the last minute. And Jason Alexander had an Annie wig. He had to play Annie because
Yes.
Sheldon backed out of it. But I guess in theater, sometimes you have to step in at the last minute to have
Yeah.
something like that happen. So you then started in elementary school and then you continued acting all the way through high school. Did you act in college as well?
I did. Yeah, I acted in college. I didn't major in theater. I majored in English because I thought that would be more, reliable,
All
which
right.
is so silly thinking back on it now. I'm like,
Well,
yeah.
did you think you wanted to be a teacher at one time?
Um, Not so much a teacher. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to be, but I've always loved writing. I love literary analysis. I would love to go back into that. So, I mean, I was considering journalism. I was considering, you know, like novelist. I was considering editor. I almost got an editing job at Scholastic, and then decided to go a different route. But yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking.
Well, it's interesting though, hearing your background, that's still a possibility. The novel, the first novel, or the story, you certainly are accumulating, I guess, a whole range of stories you could be telling to people.
Yeah.
So, in terms of your acting, and then we'll talk about some of the other cool things you do. The acting, do you have all the roles you played? And I guess you played a bunch. Do you have a favorite role you've ever had, or
I
one of the
mean,
favorites?
The Witch and Into the Woods, honestly, was it like I'm like nervous about what's next because I had such an amazing time playing that role, and it yeah, that's definitely been my favorite so far.
And it's funny because I saw you in that. I try to see you in everything you're in. And it was certainly it was an atypical role. I didn't know you were, could be a witch, but I guess you didn't know you could be a witch too. But it seems like I won't say you still every show you're in, but you certainly I, you help divert your my attention because the other one you and I were talking about off the air, help me with the name, the play that could go wrong, was that
Play the
it?
Ghost Song. Yep.
And that you were hysterical in, but that was a fun play to be in too.
Yeah.
So in terms of so those are some of your favorite roles. Do you have a bucket list role, something you want to do down the road?
Yeah, I want to play Little Edie in Grey Gardens the musical
Okay,
so bad.
so I don't know
So
it.
bad.
Yeah,
It's a really cool musical and it's really small. Like it would be really easy to put up, but it's just, I think the music is hard. I think it's, not a lot of people know it. So it might be a hard sell. But that's, I mean, that role would be incredible. I would love to play that. Also, another bucket list role that no one's ever going to let me do is I want to play Tony in West Side Story so bad. Like that, if I could play, like if anyone ever did a gender bent, West Side Story, Tony would be another dream role. So like, yeah.
Well, it reminds me, you're talking about, letting you play a role. So one of the local churches does a pageant, the Christ, pageant. And so I'm in that every so often. And I was disappointed. I wanted to be baby Jesus, but they didn't let me be baby Jesus. No,
Yeah,
no. So instead I became the jackass, with that typecast. And actually,
yeah,
I was a prison guard. But West Side Story, that'd be really cool. Why not?
yeah.
So,
I mean, I would do it. I mean, so I've also worked with a lot of directors here, and I've been really fortunate to work with them, like Dwight, who directed Into the
right.
Woods, and Fable, who was the costumer, but also directed Twelfth Night at Montford. And I've just had these experiences where I have these, working with these directors where they cast a group of people who have really good chemistry with each other, and then we kind of co-create something together. And they're always like, "Yeah, why not?" Like you come with an idea, and they're like, "Sure, try it.
Well,
Just try it and see." And like that kind of like co-creation process has been so incredible rather than like this very top down, like I'm the director, you do what I say, here's my vision. I've been really fortunate to work with directors who are really open to creative ideas.
did you just see Dwight in A Little
Yes.
Mermaid?
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh
wow. I mean, no offense to anybody else, but boy, did he steal that story. But again, back to your point, so he played against type, who would have thunk, but he was incredible in that. Are you familiar, and you probably know the names, Mark Jones and Eric Martinez?
yeah, I do. I actually just saw I saw a dress rehearsal of Thrill Me, the
I,
Leopold
I,
and the
I was going to say, but I'm saying I'm thinking of you in a good way, and I get a
yeah.
chill. I love Thrill Me, but they're doing it with it's Dogged Utopia or something like that.
Uh-huh. Yep.
But they're doing something just what you said. They're doing small musicals, and
Hmm.
that's part of their theme.
Yeah.
Stuff Thrill Me as an example that nobody else is doing. So I could see you, approaching them. They would be very receptive to it because they
Yeah.
love the idea of 2 or 4 person musicals.
Yeah.
And but wasn't Thrill Me great?
It was. Yeah, it was the show itself was very strange.
Yeah,
But I thought that the performances were great. And that one scene with the car,
right.
they like turned, I mean, it was the simplest staging and it worked so well where they had the two headlights in the bookshelf
Yeah,
and they opened it up and then they had a fog machine. I got chills and I was like, it was just so simple, but it was so good. And then Corey, and I forget his last
right.
name. Corey's just got such a beautiful voice, and Eric, of course, is always incredible. But yeah, I was
Correct.
very impressed.
Yeah, and Corey I had acted with him in something years ago, and he hadn't done anything for 6 years or something because of work. But he was just great. I'll give you his
Yeah.
name too. Give a shout out to him. But Eric Martinez is always great,
Yep.
and Corey name's escaping me, but he's just so good in that show. So if people are looking for something different, they have another week to see that show. But
Yeah,
let's
for sure.
talk about the fact that I love what you said though, in terms of so it doesn't have to be big musicals though, even though Into the Woods was as well. But I'm fascinated by your story too, Emily, in that so you've done the whole acting route. Have you done any, by the way, any directing?
I haven't yet, but I am getting into it. So I've done assistant directing. So I assistant directed Footloose last year and costumed, and then I also assistant directed Next to Normal this year, the
Oh,
musical
really?
Next to
Okay. Yeah,
out
and
there.
I did see you there. Now it's a great show too.
Yeah, they
So
did such an incredible job. And so I assistant directed that and assistant music directed. So music direction is something that I am definitely like really trying to break into and figure out, just get into that because I love helping people learn music and I love helping people make something their own because like everyone has listened to the cast album of almost everything, so it's so easy to try to like mimic the person that you like the most, who's sung the role. And, I love trying to help myself and other people make creative choices to kind of differentiate yourself. Um, but yeah, so for directing, that's, I've been working at heart as an assistant director and as a costumer pretty much with the express purpose of eventually getting to a point where I can direct a show myself.
But let me ask you your opinion in terms of, is that a good or bad idea that if you're going to be in a show, to see the movie or show version before you see it, or do you try to do that if it's available?
I I don't think it's a good or a bad idea. I think it's what you well, okay, I'll answer it in a different way. I think that um looking at really amazing performers and what they've done and in the rehearsal process, experimenting with trying to match what they've done is actually a really good technique for voice and acting. And then once where you're at performance, hopefully you've gotten to a point where you can make your own choices and you can differentiate yourself. But yeah, I mean, I think I love watching the different versions of things that exist, and like pulling inspiration from all the different versions. Like I've seen 4 or 5 different versions of Into the Woods, and so yeah, I listened to all of the witches I could find, just to hear what they were doing, because something I also love to do is like if I listened to all of them and then I was like, I'm gonna make some choices that I haven't heard anyone do.
Okay, which is cool.
Like, yeah, maybe someone has, out there, like not to say I'm like super original, but like I was like I'm gonna make at least 1 or 2 choices that I've never heard anyone make in all of my like listening to this role. So
There's Into the Woods. Was there a movie version of it, or I guess somewhere there?
yes, there's a movie version, and Meryl Streep was the witch,
Oh,
so
I was
that
going to
is
ask you.
very big, um, like those are big shoes to fill, and obviously I was not trying to fill those shoes, but getting inspiration from that, and then obviously Bernadette Peters, what originated the role, and Patina Miller has played it, and Vanessa Williams played the witch, and then Hannah Waddingham, who is in Ted Lasso now, she
Okay,
played it on the West End. Like, there's just so many amazing performers have done that role. So,
so when you were getting ready for Into the Woods, did you then also check on YouTube and see who else performed it? Did you watch some of those clips?
yeah, I mean, I also like I looked at every like I try to look if I like a song, I also just like get kind of fixated on things, and I love to hear every different version I can find, even like, little, bootleg videos that someone took at like a college production
Right.
of Into the Woods. I love to hear it. So yeah, I mean, I'll watch anything before I perform. I don't fancy myself so arrived in my craft that like I can come up with it all on my own. Like I'm all about finding inspiration in other really amazing performers.
Because no offense to you, but I think you were like the perfect witch, so I don't want to say that being like typecast or something, you said
Yeah,
you should be a witch, but you were really, I don't know how to describe it, but you were really, I could see you being the witch in that role. You just seemed, but you seemed to have a lot of fun with it though, in a way, did you?
I did. I had a lot of fun with it. There are a lot of elements of who I am that are very similar to the witch. I have never kidnapped anyone, and I've never, killed anyone,
Not
but
yet.
I have not yet anyway. Yeah. But I think getting down to the root of who she is and being someone who, has this intense sense of self-preservation and sees the bigger picture all the time and isn't worried about the messy little bits and is like, it doesn't matter whose fault it is that XYZ happened. It doesn't matter, what happened in the past. What matters is that there's this huge existential threat, facing us right now. And maybe I'm not right in what I'm doing, but I'm trying something. I'm trying to fix it, and I'm not, that kind of like bold, impulsive action, which is not always a good thing, but that's definitely something I identify with. I am a go-getter. So
Well, right, and we'll talk about your go-getting in a second. But
yeah.
just before we shift gears, I was able to dig it up. A shout out to Corey Link was the guy
Yes.
with Eric Martinez and Corey Link were in Thrill Me, and I think they have another weekend of that show. Very
Yeah.
unusual show, but definitely worth seeing if you get a chance. But let's go back to you then. So I got the acting part of you, but what I find so cool about what you do is you not only have acted, but let's talk about the other things you've done as well. You also got into costuming. And how does one get into costuming? How does somebody become a, like, as a kid,
Yeah.
or do you know how to sew?
I do. Yeah. So
Okay,
I was taught how to sew from a very young age, and I love clothes.
right.
I love costumes. My mom, when I was little, like 4 and 5, she finally had to make a rule that I was only allowed 3 costume changes a day because she was doing so much laundry.
Right, I love it.
Because I wasn't, putting on dresses and playing in the house. I was like putting on an outfit and going out and rolling in the mud. So like she's like, okay, you can have 3 costumes per day. That's it.
And,
And like,
and three is pretty generous, you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, for me, it felt like a major restriction because I would change, every hour. So I've always loved costumes. I've always loved clothes. I love fashion history. It's something that's really fascinating to me. And, but to be perfectly honest, like I got into it because costuming pays
Right.
and acting doesn't as much. It doesn't pay as much. So I was kind of looking at different things that I could do on the production side of things so that I could spend more time at the theater. And, Candace Dickinson out at Hart is a good friend of mine, and she gave me my first costuming job. So I costumed Big Fish when she did Big
Oh,
Fish the musical.
wait, I have to stop
Yeah,
you talking about great shows. Were you the primary costumer or the only costumer for
I
that?
was the only costumer for that. Yeah.
Wow, that
Yeah.
first of all, what a great show. I just loved
Yeah.
it. But again, not because you just said it, but the costumes I kind of remember, you know, and it was interesting because I guess some shows are easier to costume than others, you know.
That one was not easy.
Right, because they didn't have typical 20 cent, you know, anything that is not typical makes it harder to do. So you did Big Fish. What a great production that was. And so, which is cool. So that's the first time you ever did costumes?
I mean, it was the first time I officially did costumes as like the lead costumer. Like I did a rotation of costumes in the drama department in college, and I kind of always tend to costume myself in shows like I'll style it or I'll accessorize it, with permission, of course, but like like in Swonderful, for example, I wore
Right.
the tuxedo in Swonderful, and that was because we got there and it was all these racks of flapper dresses, and and I love a flapper dress and I love a dress. I love all the things, but for some reason I was like, I just don't want to wear one of these dresses. So I went to Glenn Arnett,
Right.
and I didn't know him at all. I just like it was my first show back. I didn't know him. And I just like walked up to Glenn. I was like, "Hey, Glenn," I was like, "I really don't want to wear a dress. Do you mind if I wear tux?" And he was like, "What?" And I was like, like Marlena Dietrich and like, Victor Victoria, Julie Andrews, Victor Victoria. And he was like, but it's 30s, right? Like it's gonna fit in the time period. I was like, yeah, yeah. And he was like, okay. And then when I came in costume and showed it to him, he just loved it because I found like a vintage tails coat. So I was wearing a tails coat and a top hat and like a frilly white shirt. Anyway, so I'm always kind of trying to angle my own costume into things. But that was my first time as like the official costume designer for a whole show.
And thanks for giving the shout out to Glenn, who's
Yeah.
another of my many favorite theater type people. But that's really cool that he let you do that. You know, he just
Yeah,
said,
it is cool because he could have said
right.
absolutely not. That's crazy.
His
Um,
vision. So you did then. So both those shows. Talk about some other things you've costumed. So Big Fish, I love. Have you costumed anything else?
yeah, so I costumed Footloose,
Okay.
out of Heart as well. So that was a lot of 80s prom dresses, which are beautiful, but they fall apart. Oh my God. I was fixing prom dresses all like every single day. It was crazy. So that was a lot of fun. I did costumes for the vagina monologues down at Hendersonville
Okay.
Theater.
By the
Um,
way, just digress. Thank you for mentioning that. I love that show. Okay, and I can even see the costumes. And just sorry, the well, we'll give a shout out. That was Ellen Pappas was the director, right?
yeah.
We'll give it Ellen. I love Ellen's work. But then the I'm so sorry. But I remember her costumes. Jennifer Ross is no longer in the area. You know that?
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
No.
it's very she just moved out back to Pennsylvania, I believe,
Okay.
within the last couple months. But I remember her costumes in that show. I remember that it was she was a motorcycle thing, or there was
Yeah,
a
she had a motorcycle jacket, and then one of them was like a black sheer nightie with with feathers on it, and all that kind of stuff. So
but
yeah,
isn't that funny? And that's, I guess, kind of a compliment to you that I remember it, and
yeah,
I remember the costumes in that. I remember the costumes and the other stuff you've done. So, and to Hendersonville's credit to take that show and to make it come alive, so it wasn't a typical, I think Ellen did a great job with it. It wasn't just typical for people reading out of a book. I really enjoyed that. But the costumes, who would have thunk there was something to the costumes?
yeah.
So it's funny. So I've seen a bunch of stuff you've done. Anything else you've done from a costume standpoint?
Yeah, I costumed a few of the War of the Roses shows at Montford last summer.
Okay.
And then some of the costumes I put together were used in subsequent productions that I wasn't costuming. I costumed myself for Richard III. So I really loved that costume. But yeah, so I've done a few things at Montford, and then I did the so Halloween Inc. is a an organization that is out in Mitchell County, and it the purpose of it is to bring kind of economic development and opportunity to the area through this fall festival that they throw. So they try and bring in big name bands, and they get all the local schools and everything involved. So it's the Halloween fall festival, and they last or 2 years ago, I guess, because last year we got
Right.
rained out. We got washed out by Helene in a big way.
Right.
Um, but they added a haunted house to the festival, and so they used this. It was a haunted schoolhouse because there was this old 1930s schoolhouse that
Very cool.
had been sitting abandoned for a really long time, and they were turning it into a community center. And so we kind of took over the school and turned it into a haunted house. And so it was their first time doing anything like that. And so I designed and then created the costumes for all of the characters in that haunted house.
Cool. And what's exciting about that, to actually have a haunted house at a facility that probably looks like a haunted house or very
Oh yeah,
easy. Some place that you've
very fun.
seen, they just do it in the outside, but that sounds really cool. By the way, off the air, if you can remember, Emily, give me a contact there as well, because I'd like to do a show leading to the fall on
Yeah,
they're doing it again in the fall.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, they're not doing the full
Right.
festival this fall because the areas that they work out in the roads are still
So, yeah.
washed out. Yeah, it's still really hard to navigate, and they're still doing a lot of like major stuff. But they are planning for 2026 to be back up in full swing. So yeah, I'll get you that information. It's Chandler Arnold and Gina Phillips
Will they
who
be
are.
doing, though, this fall, will they be doing the haunted house?
They won't be doing the haunted
Oh, a
house, but they'll
shame.
be doing
Okay.
some of the fall festival events.
But that must have been a lot of fun for you to do the haunted house and to
Very
actually do the costumes on it. Very, very cool. And so, which is kind of interesting. So you learned to become a costumer in large part, it seems like just by doing it kind of thing.
Yeah,
Is that it? And
yeah,
then,
sure.
yeah. And then, so in addition to costuming work you do, you also, mentioned you also a voice, I guess, coach, or what would you call it? So a voice coach. How'd you get into that?
I really got into it because I mean, first of all, I love to sing, and like I said, I've been singing since before I could speak. And I also had kind of an interesting vocal journey myself. I was a musical theater, belter, big brassy voice for almost all up until, college. And then I actually had a vocal cord hemorrhage when I was in college. And so I took quite a bit of time off of singing to rest and to kind of rethink things. And then when I was ready to get back into it, I went to the best voice teacher on campus at Vassar, Drew Mentor, who has had a very long opera career and is a countertenor and is just fabulous and an amazing teacher. But his studio was very sought after. And I went to him and I was like, if you fix, I will do anything you say if you fix me. And he was like, okay, so you're gonna be a coloratura soprano. And I was like, ooh, really? So basically it was like a full 180 from what I'd been doing before. So it was, very intense classical training. It was really hard. It felt like Bambi learning to walk again. Like it sounded terrible. And like he was so funny. He was like the perfect energy that I needed. Because the first studio recital that we had, I was like, Drew, I sound terrible. And he was like, yeah, you do. But you still have to go sing because if you don't do it now, like if you don't do it, you'll never do it. And he was like, you're learning how to walk again. So yeah, it doesn't sound great, but you have to perform anyway. And I was like, but it was like a really good lesson. So I really, he taught me a lot, and like I owe a lot of my vocal technique and a lot of my vocal longevity and, love of singing to him. But it also made me really appreciative of the art of teaching voice. And I kind of fell into it because people were kind of coming to me and asking me for tips, on things. And then also just some of my fellow actors, particularly fellow actors who were going through gender transition. So, they started taking hormones, and that changes your voice. And so they were like, what do I do? I'm having this issue. How do I navigate this change as a singer? And so that was kind of what drew me into it. Just kind of like consulting and helping out friends. And then I was like, I really like doing this. And so I started offering, kind of full voice lessons to folks.
By the way, I want to thank you for what you just did, giving a shout out to the teacher. Is he still there?
I believe he's still at Vassar.
Okay.
I think he's still teaching there. I haven't connected with him in
Okay.
such a long time, but yeah,
Because I'm encouraging you to, because when, as former teacher, it's a real thrill to hear from former students,
yeah,
So when you get the copy of the clip, do send it to them,
okay,
and tell them we're recognizing them on a webcast in West North
yeah.
Carolina. But it's really cool that they made a difference in your life. So talking to them, because I don't understand that, you can help explain it to me. So I saw the other day we were talking off the air about the show at ACT was what was the show we just talked about? They're doing now. Um,
They're doing now.
yeah, at
Oh,
ACT,
Little Mermaid or Into the
Little Mermaid, yeah.
Yeah.
And so great. Another recommendation. We talked about the thing that the other show, that thrilled me, but also Little Mermaid, great show. But I saw it too. Explain that. So they have a music director, and so what does the music director actually do in a show such as Little Mermaid or any other show you've been involved? What's the role of the music director?
So the music director is, I mean, it depends on the show a little bit. It changes depending on the show. But the main purpose of the music director is to teach the music to the actors. So, to help them figure out the parts that they have when they're singing harmony in groups, to help them figure out their entrances, when you've got music going on and lines going on, and you're having to say your lines and also count measures of music so that you come in at the right time. And also helping people navigate, like, if they're like, oh, I'm having a hard time hitting this note or hitting this note consistently, or, whatever the case may be, kind of helping them navigate through that. So essentially just teaching the actual music itself to the actors. And then some music directors then are also conductors. So like John Crowley,
Right.
who did Thrill Me and also Into the Woods that I was just in, he taught us the music, but then he was also the band leader, so he played piano and led the band, and when he could was giving us, cues to enter because it's really really complicated music.
Yeah.
So,
And whenever John does anything, it's just he
oh my
does
God, John is
beautiful, beautiful work.
infinitely talented. I love John.
But now, so a music director can also be the conductor of the orchestra, or can you have you ever can you do you play an instrument?
I played piano for a very long time, and I do read music, but I am getting back into playing piano. So I am not very proficient in any musical instrument, but I do read music. So
Okay. So you've been so I guess then you're saying the music director could also be oftentimes is the pianist or some other member of the
doesn't
orchestra
have,
as
yep.
well. And sometimes I've seen right music director can also, it's a lot of extra work, can be the director of the show
Yeah,
too, or not having music director. Or
right.
again, to give a shout out to another of my favorite people, Zoe Zlonke at ACT. I don't know if you knew this about her, but she did the directing, the choreography for Little Mermaid. And on top of that, she was telling me she had to step in for roles on two of the separate nights already.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to do that? Have you ever done one thing and then had to jump in somewhere else?
Um, no, I've never had to go on for someone else, but I have done a lot of emergency costume
Okay.
hair backstage. Even when I'm not the costumer, I tend to be the go-to for that. So I've never had to go on for another, for another person. And Zoe, to kind of to that point too, Zoe went on for four different roles in Into the Woods
Oh, really
throughout the
too?
yeah.
Oh,
So she ended up playing Rapunzel one night. She played the baker's wife one night. She played one of the stepsisters one night, and then I can't remember. I feel like she played another one, but then also Dwight went on for Jack's mom. It was
right.
a wild time. It was a wild time. There was one weekend where we had like six people out.
But you know what's amazing too, as you talk about it, Emily, I'm amazed that local theater does as well as it does in terms of very few shows, with the exception of when COVID was out and the hurricane maybe too, but shows somehow go on, even though, to have a big cast, like Into It's fairly large also, and that it seems to somehow go on, even though people are, and in the audience, you mentioned this, I didn't notice it, but when I saw the other day, Little Mermaid, I didn't notice that, somebody wasn't there. So it's really Zoe's credit, and to other actors, Dwight does the same thing too.
Yeah.
Amazing, talented kind of guy. Costume designs, back to the question I asked earlier, do you have a dream? We'll ask the two fields you're into. So costume design, do you have a dream show you want to do costumes for?
Hmm. Um, I love the idea of I would love to costume a new musical.
Okay.
Like I would love to originate
Yeah.
the look. Because you have these musicals where, the costumes are so iconic.
Right.
Think about Wicked or something.
Right.
And, I would love even if it was just a local, production, but like something brand new where I got to create what a character looks like from scratch. Like no inspiration, no one's done it before, no inspiration. I mean, other than, what you draw from it, in a typical way, but like just coming up with something completely brand new would be an absolute dream.
And it sounds like it sounds like a lot of fun. Or like say iconic shows
Hmm.
with lots of people like Newsies, but that's been done. A lot of
Yeah,
interesting, not interesting costumes, I guess old costumes.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but that'd be fun to see a show I've never seen before and see the
yeah.
costumes for the first time too. Same question, music direction. Is there any show you've always wanted to? You mentioned a couple of the small shows. Any like a big show you've always wanted to do?
Um, I I would, I mean, I guess I'm coming back to West Side Story. I mean, West Side Story would be an absolute dream um, to be involved in on the production side in any, in any capacity. But I just love that music so much. And I think it would be really amazing to get to. work on something so classic and try, again, try to bring something new to it.
Yeah, and it's, I guess, you raised an interesting point. You bring something new. So I just saw Oklahoma
Hmm.
at Sod.
Yeah.
I don't know who did the costumes, but I thought they're very good, even though, as you said, it's easier to do, I guess, harder to do stuff that they don't have a lot of costumes for. Like modern stuff is easy to do, relatively easy to do costumes for. But older stuff, you have to have the costumes that fit the style it was in. Did you see Oklahoma?
I didn't get to see it, but I had friends in it and I've heard
Right.
about the production itself. So
But
yeah.
I thought the costumes were great. You know, it's just it
Yeah.
really felt like Oklahoma in whatever
Mhm.
period of time is in the future.
Yeah.
Down the road, we're talking as we wrap down here. It seems you've done a bunch of different things in your life. You know, I would say, is there
Yeah.
something next 10 years? It could be in either theater or some other field. Is there something you see yourself doing for your next life or your next
My next
career?
act. Yeah.
Yeah, your next
Um,
act.
yeah,
It'll be
I
the novel, by the way. You said you want, you know, you
yeah,
can
I want to start writing. I really something that a dream that I have, and you know, I hesitate to speak it in, because it's going to be really hard, but like so I love horror. Obviously, I did the haunted house. I'm now the costume director also at the Hendersonville Haunted Farm. So I'm going to be, working on their costumes and helping to originate some characters down there, hopefully. I love horror movies. My focus in college in my English degree was Gothic literature. So like, I love that. I want to write a play that is actually like scary, like really, and I'm reading, I'm challenging myself, and I have a list of things that I'm going to try to read over the summer. But we go to the theater and we feel, we cry and we laugh and we feel like we're falling in love and we feel like we're grieving, but like I've never really had the experience of being truly afraid,
right.
when I'm watching a play, and I find that really fascinating. And so I would love to write a play in that genre, and try to make it really scary.
It's funny you say that because we were talking before about Thrill Me, and a good friend of mine wouldn't see the show because he didn't like the theme.
Yeah,
And
very
so,
dark.
a good friend to the guy, he just refused to see something. It's not a cheerful
Mhm.
show, but that's the drawback, I guess, writing something a truly horror
Yeah.
story. So, is that going to be a play or a musical?
Probably. So I'm probably going to start with a play, because as much as I love musicals, there is an element of suspension of disbelief in a musical that I think is already,
All right.
straining the limits of that, and so then adding in, buying into the horror piece of it, I think would be really hard. Although I will say, one of the key elements of horror movies that makes them scary is the music, is the
Right.
score or the lack thereof, the contrast between silence and the noises, that you're hearing from the actual, killers, and all of this, and then also the music itself, the score, is such a huge part of that. So I don't know, maybe it's a play with music. I don't
Well,
know.
it's something I'm thinking about. I wouldn't say it was really scary. Little Shop of Horrors comes to mind, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah, Little
Uh,
Shop. I mean, Sweeney Todd has
oh
elements of
yeah, Sweeney Todd too.
that. Yeah,
Have you ever done Little Shop of Horrors?
I no, did we? No, we did it in college, but I remember learning that music. Maybe we did some of it in like a review.
Right.
But I love Little Shop of Horrors. Actually, my niece, so my sister, I was a surrogate for my sister. So I had my niece, and my niece's bio dad, his name is John Riddleberger, and he is a puppeteer in New York, and he's in Little Shop right
Oh,
now.
really? Very cool.
Yeah, so we're hoping to get up there to see him, but just kind of funny that you mentioned Little Shop. But yeah, I mean there are all these shows that have those elements of horror. And but I've personally never seen something that was truly like scary the way like Psycho is,
Right,
you know.
right.
And I'm like, why? Like how can we evoke all of the emotions but not fear in theater?
But
So
you raise a good point because yeah, I don't recall though ever seeing Psycho the musical. I haven't seen that yet.
no,
Yeah.
no. I mean, there's Carrie the musical, and it's very good. I mean, well, it got panned critically. I think it's very good.
I never saw it.
Yeah,
Emily, they give anybody who wants to get in touch with you or track you down for about one of 73 different reasons, but
yeah.
specifically if they're looking for somebody help with costumes,
Mhm.
and it's funny that I actually remember it. So that's kind of I think that's a good sign that I actually remember the
Yeah.
costumes.
I mean, as
Although
long as you remember them in a positive way, I
right.
think. Yeah,
I'll tell you a story off the air about a not
yeah.
positive way. And also, so they can contact you for, I guess, a bunch of different things for costuming help, also for the vocal, for the music directing help. If they can twist your arms, hopefully we'll get you as an actor also down the road. What's the best way to reach you?
So I can be reached on my social media. On Facebook, it's Emily Dake. On Instagram, it's mdake, so just EMDAKE. And then also by email, emilydake@gmail.com. So I'm putting together a website because I don't know how I'm going to organize this website because it's going to have like 80 different like,
Well,
are you here
you,
for public health or are you here for voice lessons or are
off
you
the,
here?
I had the same problem. Talk to me off the air. I'll give you
Yeah.
credit for that. But anyway,
Yeah.
if you want to reach Emily Dake, certainly she told you how to reach her. Certainly, if you see anything she's involved in, catch it. You're going to enjoy it. I'm still remembering the witch, and no offense to, you being a witch. I don't see you as a witch, but that
Look,
was
I take it with pride. I love
okay. But Emily, thank you for being my guest edition of the Blaine's World webcast. Also, I thank my producer, Cappy Tassetti, and hopefully I'll see you down the road, if not before then. Emily, you be
it.
well.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Okay, this was great.